Gary Franchi here for the Reality Report. We're joined now by Mark Anderson, who is the roving editor for the American Free Press, who recently attended what has now been dubbed as Bretton Woods II. Bretton Woods II also now we know has been funded to the tune of $50 million by the George Soros Institute for New Economic Thinking. The stated purpose is to bring together more than 200 academic, business, and government policy leaders to move beyond the original Bretton Woods Conference agreements in 1944, which established the IMF, World Bank, and the United Nations to engage the larger European Union as well as the emerging economies of Eastern Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Now, we know that's their stated purpose. This comes from the New American writer Bob Edelman. Mark, what did you see while you were there?
Well, me and an AFP associate went up there April 10, Sunday, really behind on sleep. We got up there by hook or crook. There was no media there. What we didn't see is just as significant as what we did see. The first Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 had the leaders of 44 nations there, many of whom got out on the lawn and posed for group photographs for the press. Lots of press activity. What we didn't see was any press whatsoever. You would think there'd be a couple of news crews, local or national, parked along the long driveway off of Highway 302, but it was just deserted. You would never know there was a conference going on there of this magnitude, save for one lonely protester who put up signs such as George Soros take a hike, George Soros is a Marxist, and so on. So we talked to the townsfolk, most of whom were unaware or only vaguely aware of something going on there because there were large polished black limousines popping up here and there now and then, and the press of any kind of disagreeable press or press they perceived to be quizzical of what they're doing, and the public, of course, was completely barred. It kind of mimicked the annual Bilderberg meetings in many ways, although more low key.
Yeah, that's sort of what I felt it would probably end up being like, as somewhat of a smaller scale Bilderberg meeting. It says here in the article that Paul Volcker, former head of the Federal Reserve System, was there. Jeffrey Sachs, the director of the Earth Institute. Joseph Stiglitz, the holder of the Nobel Prize in Economics. And Rob Johnson, the INET executive director, attended. But there's no listing of anybody like a Ron Paul or a Peter Schiff to throw in some economic common sense. What did you see? You were not able to get in? There was nothing actually to report from there? Were you able to get any feedback from hotel staff or any inside information?
Yeah, hotel staff. One of the things was, to the person, the staffers were saying that they risked their jobs if they spoke at all. And you could argue that the Institute for New Economic Thinking is private, and hey, can't they rent the hotel for several million and have it all to themselves, and why do we got to eavesdrop? But if it's harmless academic sermonizing, then what's the problem? And yes, there's no current officially serving U.S. officials there right now, but a lot of recent ones like Paul Volcker and Mr. Summers and so on and so forth, and Bank of England people and London School of Economics people. These are all the creme de la creme of globalism. And so, the difference between public and private anymore is almost, it's been blurred almost to total irrelevance. And so you have this private organization that you would think would be more open-minded, open to the public, or at least not close off the whole hotel, and yet they're acting even more dictatorial than the original Bretton Woods conferees over 60 years ago, many of whom were current government officials. And so hotel staff were saying things like, after they served the food to the esteemed guests, they'd have to leave the room immediately and not linger around or listen in on anything. And they all said, just about all of them, that they'd lose their jobs or risk losing them if they gave any more details, although they weren't allowed to really hear any details for the reasons I just stated. Everything was very, very controlled, and yet the only newspaper that evidently got in there on April 9, the New Hampshire Union Leader, had kind of a puff piece, and that article gave the idea that the conferees were, democratically minded idealists. Well, if they're so idealistic and democratic, why the mega hush here? What's the problem?
Yeah, it does sound like another Bilderberg-style meeting. The article here says that they came to establish new international rules reconstitute the International Monetary Fund and to reform the currency system. Do you think that this is smelling like the creation of a global currency?
I suspect that it is, possibly because the dollar is tanking so bad. Also because I've always suspected in my personal analysis that all the clamoring to end the Fed, or at least end Federal Reserve notes, they might say, sure, we'll do that. Here's your Amero, or here's your Bancor, or these different names that have been given to proposed regional and global currencies over the years. They might have some sort of other currency waiting in the wings that would go along with the North American Union. That's speculation, true, but the thing you just described is not microeconomic tinkering. What you're talking about is macroeconomic major machinery overhaul. And so there's no way that we can say this was just some harmless group of academics getting together and having fun and exchanging notes and talking shop. This is about major changes. But, you know, we toiled to get up there, and we thought there'd be at least some local press, some TV crews. There's nothing. And the staff is telling the things that I said, how sternly they were warned and corralled and kept from hearing any information or any of the proceedings. So there's something very significant afoot. And a lot of the globalist organizations at the local level, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, different World Affairs Council chapters, have been very busy in the weeks and months leading up to this thing. The globalists are on the move, that is for sure.
Well, Soros was quoted as saying that the international monetary system cannot survive in its present form. Well, they're using fiat currency. And the only thing that I can see them doing is moving to another larger scale fiat currency, and rather than going back to a something that's locked to a commodity like a silver or gold standard. Would you say so?
I don't know. You know, I don't know if they're getting into that part of it. Certainly, they want to make sure that the U.S. is not economically sovereign, just like they do with the rest of the world. And I just think that they're going to probably up the ante, if not to another currency, to at least seriously remold what we have now, because I think they fear that the peasants are revolting a little bit, and I think they're probably trying to bulletproof what they have now, in as much as they probably want to make certain fundamental changes. But the names that they have there, there's even a guy from the Bank of England who was there, Andy Haldane, and when you look at the list closely, you know, senior advisor from Warburg Pincus, you have Institutes of International Finance. These are carefully selected people. And I would mention, too, that the Financial Times and the New Yorker and Reuters had writers and editors there, but so far what I'm seeing is no articles coming out. If that ends up to be the case over the long term, that would mean it's just like Bilderberg in the sense that certain media are participants, but they're not reporting. They're keeping it secret.
What do you see on the horizon for these types of Bretton Woods-style conferences? You know, Bilderberg is coming up shortly. What do you see on the global front for those types of conferences?
Well, I think that with a lot of the leaders of those groups getting way up in years, David Rockefeller, Bush Sr., Kissinger, I think they want to see some things happen on their calendar, their watch, and they know that the financial crisis that we're all suffering through is waking up a large sector of the population. I think that in as much as they have a drive for power, they also are getting a little nervous that they've got to button this thing down while they still can. I mean, just look at it logically. They want to be alive. If you're someone that interested in power and conquest, you want to be alive to see the breadth of your domain. And so I think that they're really putting things on a fast track. I saw it coming about a year ago with these different globalist groups meeting around the country, having the most frequent meetings I've ever seen. And Neil Ferguson, a Harvard historian, was at a lot of these local World Affairs Council meetings, and sure enough, he turned up at this too. And so you see some of the same people at the local conferences coming to this Bretton Woods II conference, but American Free Press is doing a lot with Bretton Woods II. This was a headline that we just put out. I don't know if you can see that, but it reads, Soros convenes Bretton Woods II, and they had that meeting just as the Trilateral Commission was meeting in Washington, D.C. the very same weekend, roughly April 8 through 11.
Were you able to get to the Trilateral meeting?
Jim Tucker, my colleague, went to that while I was tapped to go up north, and do what I could with Bretton Woods II. I only had one day to work with, unfortunately. Our resources get a little thin at times, but we also have Bilderberg in our sights for June in Switzerland, and what we're going to try and do here at AFP, what I'm working on even today, is to try and connect the dots between the Trilats, the Bilderbergs, and Bretton Woods II. They wouldn't have the first Bretton Woods conference in over 60 years if they didn't have a very good reason to do it. And needless to say, it's difficult to find out precisely what they talked about. But we have some plans here at AFP, and I'm sure you do at Republic Magazine and Reality Report, to unearth those things strand by strand, link by link.
Yes, we do. What's your website, Mark?
AmericanFreePress.net.
All right. We'll look forward to the reports coming out of AFP at your newspaper, and we'll have you back on for another update.
Thanks a lot, Gary.
All right. Keep up the good work.